Liberalism claims to be a more inclusive way than Islam. What's your take on this?
There's a certain circularity to that, because liberalism, by definition, liberty, is about freedom in theory. Nevertheless, I think if we come to actually judge whether or not it is more inclusive, I don't think it would pass that test. Now, the important point to appreciate here, I would submit, is that any way of life, any culture, any ideology, worldview, necessarily makes exclusions.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way of life that is absolutely inclusive, because you have to draw moral boundaries. If you have every way of life has a morality,
mm-hmm.
and morality necessarily requires moral boundaries. If you make moral boundaries, there's some people on the other side. Otherwise, they're not boundaries. So another way of saying this is that every way of life has its exclusions, and therefore inclusions. Every way of life is inclusive on its own terms, and every way of life is exclusive on its own terms. So therefore, I think it's a sort of a shortcut or a slightly cheating way to make the criteria of which way of life is better, morally superior, I guess, or better for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
To make it inclusion or exclusion, because everyone's going to have that. It's just going to be on its own terms. Let's use some specific examples here. First of all, historically, liberalism has a very bad track record of being inclusive. Minorities everywhere. I mean, you can ask, if you ask the indigenous communities of Australia, of America, of Europe about how inclusive liberalism was since its inception, I think everyone knows the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
All other minorities have faced these issues in Europe and elsewhere. Even today, a lot of people are going to go, oh, that was in the past, but now things are different, blah, blah. But even today, one of the major talking points is about the limits of how much religion we can allow in public life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a different way of saying how much of religion should we exclude? There's consensus that it should be excluded to some extent in some domains.
Very ironic.
That's secularism, right?
Mm-hmm. What's
secularism? In theory, the separation of religion from public life or from politics or from state. Exclusion. Separation means exclusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's another word of separating it. Where you putting it somewhere else. So there's this massive debate around why you're going to exclude it and how much, and where can they use religious language in the parliament? Oh, they can use it here in the pub, but you can't use it in the parliament. Why not? Now, they have the reasons. There's reasons, and they think they're doing the right thing. But that's my point. Isn't that an exclusion that you're doing because it doesn't match with some basic principles that you affirm?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think it's fair now. And then we can use other examples, other places where clearly liberalism is not even as inclusive as Islam or pre-modern traditions. Like, for example, on the issue of legal pluralism, which means can we allow in one society different legal systems to operate? The modern nation state has a very clear no.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very clear. And we can see this here in Australia, in Europe, in any time the issue arises. Can we have, for example, Sharia law just in like family and divorce and inheritance, like those issues? People are up in arms. Now, if you look at pre-modern polities, including the Islamic caliphates, they had more room for legal pluralism. Mm-hmm. The central law was still one, the Sharia, but we were not so closed or narrow to say, well, okay, the Jews can refer to their own law in these areas. Mm-hmm. Likewise the Christians, likewise other religious traditions. Mm-hmm. So who's more inclusive then, right? Mm-hmm. There's some point, like it's not gonna, if you did a checklist, it doesn't work that way. The inclusions and the exclusions are happening on the merits of your basic worldview. That's what we should be comparing and assessing in terms of its coherence, rationality, its benefit, its track record, and other criteria.